All right. Good evening, good afternoon, I guess is what we are at right now. I've got a little bit of time. I want to get another Ukraine war update in for you guys. Do apologize. This one's a little bit shorter than normal. I've got a limited amount of time today, but let's go ahead and get rolling right into it. We'll start off with this article from The Insider. The Kremlin has launched a disinformation campaign against Ukraine through fake clone sites of Der Spiegel, Fox News, and RBC. The long story short is, if you've been paying attention to what's been going on around the Ukraine war, you may have noticed this enormous increase in the number of people that are saying that there should be negotiations with Russia, a truce with Russia, stop a ceasefire, freeze the lines right now, just in the last few days. And that's not on accident. That is a bot farm, a troll farm that has been deliberately carrying out a lot of these basically social engineered attacks. They're widely distributed like spam. It just really is a demand generated by Russia that the Ukrainians should negotiate. They're doing it on Ukrainian language and English language sites and putting it out there so that they can try and drive the narrative that Ukraine has failed and cannot win, and that they should come to the negotiating table right now. Another thing that's been a kind of a theme of this one is that the Ukrainians were just about ready to sign a deal, and they were ready to go to fully commit to a treaty with Russia and give up the fight, except for the U.S. and the U.K. told them no, you won't. So far, I have seen no reliable proof of that other than just allegations. Zero actual evidence provided of it. And the long story short is it's all disinformation campaigns. A lot of what they do is they link to articles on fake news sites. And by fake news, I'm not talking about the actual mainstream ones, even the ones that are already well known to provide information that is questionable. I'm talking about faked news sites, as in ones that look like the real thing, but they aren't. And so they link to these publications. They're made up ones of it, and make it look like these were published on a major news provider. A lot of the topics they're promoting here are that there is no need to hold Avdiivka, that Russia has already won, and Ukraine is suffering huge losses, and there will be less aid to them because Israel is pulling a lot of those resources, and that Avdiivka could become another Bakhmut, which Ukraine loses over time. Huge. These are their promoted things they're saying. If you get onto Twitter and look at Jackson Hinkle, you'll see every one of these at some point represented in his paid-for posts. Another things they're promoting is that the West is no longer interested in Ukraine. And to a certain extent, it's because other news has overtaken it and become equal to Ukraine news in the public sphere, which makes it look like what used to be expansive coverage has contracted. But it's not truly the case. The European Union is still very much involved in helping Ukraine out. The United States has a minority, and this is my opinion here, a minority of people that are jumping onto the Russian-supplied talking points bandwagon. And it's because they're trying to suck as much of the oxygen out of the room as they can. Now, then there was the Zelensky is profiting from military aid and war financing. You may have seen an article hit Time talking about Zelensky and people being so corrupt that they're making money hand over fist, and corruption and stuff like that in Ukraine. And that is, again, an example of the disinformation campaign that Russia has been putting out. If they had proof of this, if there were oligarchs making money hand over fist, we would be able to see that in other places, and yet we don't. So we're looking at all these things, and they're putting this together as basically an information attack against the war in Ukraine. There's also things that that they're talking about. This video they've been putting out about two brothers who both lost their lives and all this kind of stuff. And yet it was put out there by a huge swath of identical bot accounts that created this story around it. The video was paid for by the Kremlin, for heaven's sakes. All of this is meant to ratchet up the amount of anxiety that people feel about the war in Ukraine. Not that there shouldn't be anxiety about a war. It's absolutely natural to have anxiety. But they're trying to ratchet it up in a way that there are other conflicts that are causing more problems. And this one should go away because it's just one more distraction and a bigger world problem. So honestly, all of this comes down to the Kremlin is behind this disinformation campaign. They have the insider has a lot of information about where these come from, where the clones come from. A lot of them from Kazakh accounts and VPNs that have access to Kazakhstan. And the Twitter accounts will have one or two of other bot accounts that they're following, and Elon Musk, who's the default for a newly registered Twitter/X account. So a lot of this is the disinformation campaign that's being waged. And losing in the information space at this point is tantamount to losing in the war itself, just because of the tremendous amount of damage it does across the world. There was the same thing happening before World War II. If you really research what was going on, the Germans were very heavily marketing to people in the U.S. who were sympathetic to Germany and Germans, and saying that they were a lot more ideologically aligned than unaligned in these cases. And in some cases, they may have in fact been right. But that doesn't make the Germans correct in that regard. And it was a disinformation campaign writ large carried out in the United States right before World War II and into the starting parts of World War II. They're doing the same tactics here and now to try and drive a narrative that is not accurate and isn't true. All right, so that's kind of my talk about the disinformation campaign. I'm going to quickly move on to Ukraine itself here. Some news around the war. 3 coal mines lost electrical power in Donetsk Oblast because of shelling by the Russians. My understanding is that situation is being worked on right now. There is always, of course, a little bit of trouble in the middle of war and with things being paid out incorrectly. The Defense Ministry of Ukraine has uncovered the misallocation of additional pay across several military units. Basically, people were putting in for military pay despite not actually serving on the front lines during the time frame in question. So they're going through and they're fixing that problem. They're auditing, finding it, which is what people should be doing to find and resolve corruption. The DTEK actually says that after a windstorm, which they were reporting an enormous windstorm the other day, that this windstorm had actually battered some stuff down and damaged 10,000 transformers and 441 overhead lines. And they were damaged in the storm, and they have restored that power loss. So Ukraine's getting really good at fixing damaged energy infrastructure these days. I can't imagine why. Additional information on that, the power loss there. Now, this is Null Reports talking about the reports that the offensive in Ukraine, the Ukraine's offensive or counteroffensive has failed. And again, that's coming back to Russian disinformation to a certain extent. There are aspects that have not performed up to snuff. And that's what Null Reports talks about here. They underestimated the Russian defensive lines. You know, the Russians were literally triple and quadruple mining areas to prevent the Ukrainians from being able to penetrate those minefields. There was there's a situation with the Kovka Dam. That was a definite loss. Now, so that's the downsides, but think about the things that have also been accomplished at this time. The Black Sea Fleet has been basically driven out of Sevastopol and barely has a presence in Crimea at all at this point. Ukraine has successfully opened its own grain corridor that the Russians have not been able to close. They've opened up new fronts on the Dnieper River that were not open before, and they've managed to fight quite a bit below south of Bakhmut, and of course get even closer to Tokmak and bring Tokmak itself under fire from Ukrainian forces. So there has been progress. There continues to be progress. To call it a failure might be stretching it. To call it an unmitigated success is definitely stretching it. But a lot of that is because of the pressure that was put on by Western interests, Western media, Western press, that wanted a big, bold, amazing advance because they sent a few tanks. And that's not how this works. The situation, the circumstances have to be created to make an effective wide advance happen like that. And a lot of that is preparation, artillery preparation, destroying supply lines, going through and getting all of these things done until the situation is so untenable for the Russians that they can no longer sustain and hold their positions and have to fall back or be destroyed. That is the situation on that regard. I thought it was an interesting little commentary by Null Reports. The little bit of additional information on this, but this is a comment from the spokesman for Ukraine's Southern Operational Command South, Natalia Hominiak, who I'm sure I'm butchering the pronunciation of her name. They're just talking about the situation around the Dnieper River, and I will talk about that in a little bit here when we get to the front lines. Interesting thing about this is that the Ukrainians are continuing to be very tight-lipped about the whole situation over there. All they're saying is that the results need to be confirmed first. Counter battery is working on the left bank. Russian equipment is being destroyed. Results will come over time. They're keeping mum about the situation over there on the left bank of the Dnieper River. And they're being they aren't saying much because they don't want to spoil it for the actual results. So far, everything we know about the Dnieper River has been coming from the Russian side, which is always questionable. Let's move over to the news out of Russia. And before I do that, I'm going to just take a pause right here. I am looking for comments, so please let me know you're here. I haven't seen anything just yet, but it looks like my streaming page here might have locked up a little bit. So if you're here and you're watching, let me know. Absolutely. And I'll continue on with the Russia news. As reported by state-backed media, the deputy commander of the Russian forces in Ukraine, Colonel General Mikhail Teplinsky, has likely personally taken over command of the Russian Dnipro grouping of forces. Teplinsky is very well respected in the Russian chain of command. He's been a competent commander, which is one of the reasons why, of course, he was pulled off the line, because as a competent commander, he was telling the Russian leadership things they didn't want to hear. However, they've put him back in charge of the Dnieper River front, basically, the Kherson front, to try and repel the Ukrainian attempts across the river there. It'll be interesting to see if anything changes about the situation around the Dnieper River because of this command chain. The talk from the Russians about getting out of the nuclear test ban treaty really says more about the mindset of the Russians than it does about the efficacy of the nuclear test ban treaty. Basically, the Russians are looking for anything that they can use to break the public opinion of their failures in this area. They've really, I mean, it really just shows how frustrated Putin is with the situation, that he's basically going back to nuclear threats and getting out of the nuclear test ban treaty. There was an explosion reported at a Russian explosive factory that was in Permkrai, a Russian state-run, according to Russian state-run news agency RIA Novosti. They say that nobody was on the site when this happened, and that they were immediately able to resume operations shortly afterwards. If there was nobody on site, why would they be resuming operations immediately after? They need to think about what they're actually saying in these press releases here. I'm going to refresh a screen over here, just in case. If I drop, you'll know what happened. Come on, give me back. There we go. All right, well, that's where it's expected to be. Okay, there we go. Continuing on. Russian investigators claim that 2 soldiers were arrested over Volnovakha killings. 2 soldiers got into basically were cut off from booze by a local liquor establishment of some kind. So they went and raided a family's house, killed the family, and stole their stuff and their liquor and things like that. That's 9 members of a single Ukrainian family in occupied Volnovakha. They have taken these soldiers into custody. They do report that these are contract personnel from the Far East. Does not excuse their actions, and I'm honestly surprised it even came before a judicial investigation in the slightest. If you've been paying attention, you saw the riots in Makachkala. There we go. They were over a plane that had just come from Israel, and so they were looking for Jews to lynch. Well, it didn't take long for Russians to start blaming the West and Ukraine for pulling off an information, basically an information attack of their own to make it look like the Russians were the bad people. Moving on, there's been a fire expanding at Zankoy 5, which is an airfield in Crimea. Originally, this airfield had been pretty much abandoned, had no real use. But after the attack on the helicopters in Berdyansk, it looks like they've managed to make a situation where they're going to try and use it for their helicopters instead. So it looks like it's also been coming under fire from Ukrainians since that point in time. They have been using it as an air defense position as well. A small anti-submarine ship is smoking in Sevastopol Bay. No details, but this could be stuff from yesterday's strikes on Sevastopol carried out by the Ukrainian military. And once again, we're seeing more commentary from the Russians, calls to negotiate. And he's talking about figuring out relations with the West. He's saying there's a need to build new security infrastructure. And all in all, it tells you that the Russians really desperately need an opportunity to reset on the front lines. They're really struggling to keep things at a status quo right now. And so this indicates that they are really having trouble doing anything to advance their cause. According to Tatarigami, it looks like 2,000 cargo containers containing over 500,000 artillery shells have been delivered. This is a conservative estimate. It's both 152 and 122 millimeter projectiles. And they did a whole lot of stuff in preparation here. And also noted that they are providing, let me see if I can find it now. I think it was somewhere in here. I think I'll see if I can find it in a bit here. They're also sending some very old 1950s and 60s era artillery pieces to fire some of this as well. 4 Ukrainian armed forces shells hit a train containing fuel at the Mushkatovo railway station in Donetsk. So they say there were no casualties, but that's a lot of fuel to lose. Hitting those logistics. All right, brief pause here for just a moment. Hang on a second. Okay, sorry about that. Had a distraction from my son. He's been working on our pickup truck to try and get it working. All right, so let's see. One more thing. I want to check one more thing. Let's see. There we go. Content. Live. Okay, looks normal. All right, sorry about that. I want to just check one more thing while I had the opportunity at a pause. Let's keep it going. The Institute for the Study of War, I'm going to quickly go through their maps today, kind of talk through the things, and then we can go on from there and touch on everything else going on. The overall assessment of the control of terrain. Then we got this one where they start talking about things going on. You can see right here, this is Torsky. The Russians made some progress here about a month and a half or two ago, and then it stopped. And I mean hard stopped. And it looks like they've made, according to new footage, they've managed to make a little bit more of an advance towards Torsky, again, according to the Institute for the Study of War. Whereas the Ukrainian forces managed to move forward in the Andriivka area, which is south of Bakhmut. And you can see that right here. So they're making progress on both those fronts there, and things are still moving along. Moving over to now this is a closer look at Bakhmut here. That's old information, and that's old information. So we're going to keep on going for now. Avdiivka is one of the major areas we're watching. We can see a lot of that going on around Avdiivka. There have been claims by Russian forces that they have managed to fully control this area just near Stepova here. Ukrainians are countering that claim, saying they have full fire control over those positions, and anything that gets up there dies. There's also some indications of some advances by the Russians near Krasnohorivka, which would be right in this area right here. It looks like they're mainly looking at Marinka, which makes a little bit of progress every couple of weeks. Keep on moving. Now, they did assess yesterday that there was a change right here, just near Rabotna, right in here, where the Ukrainians managed to gain more territory. It's an active part of the front. They're making progress. Weather is becoming a factor, but you know what? I don't think it's stopping. They may slow down a little bit here and there, but they're slowly expanding their front in that area so that they have managed to move down, and they're going to expand it out. The thing is that the Russians aren't going to be able to man the entire front line. They don't have the personnel. So they might have some people across many of these areas, but if they're going to stop Ukraine, they're going to have to focus their forces a little bit more. So that's one of the interesting things there. And then we've got the Kherson region here, with the Ukrainians having shown advancements to Poima as of October 28th. That's right in here. And then, of course, they advanced south of Antonovsky Bridge. They're just making progress across the Kherson, the Dnieper River. So all well and good. We can move on. I don't even need the map right now because that was a good overview of what was going on. Here's a picture of that Russian fuel train that got hit in Donetsk. Now, here's where things get interesting. according to War Gonzo, Ukrainian forces are making a breakthrough to point. Whoops, wrong color. Let's try and change that up there. Whoops. There we go. Ukrainian forces are making a breakthrough near Poema and Podstepna here, and they are not being very specific about what they're seeing and not. So we know that there's heavy resistance in the Poema area and the Podstepna area. We don't know exact details on it, but the Ukrainians are making progress. This indicates they're intending to stay again, rather than just be in and out. Krinky, the Ukrainians are mining the approaches and expanding the bridgehead, or as they say, the Ukrainians maintain positions in the populated area. Remote mines in the area around Krinky, they're basically dropping them in with artillery shells and things like that, making it harder for the Russian armed forces. And then when the sappers go in to try and clear the mines, they're dropping explosive devices from drones. They're expanding their territory around Krinky and in the directions of Kozachi Laheri, and they're improving their positions in Podstepny. So overall, Ukraine is making progress on the Kherson front, and that's the situation there. Avdiivka, again, they report that the Ukrainians have fire control over the Terikon waste heap or slag heap. And a quick reality check for the situation around Avdiivka. There is a lot of talk about how difficult it is in that area. Okay, I think I've got a good view of that. And some people are saying it's because of 8 years worth of fortification work. And that is a factor. But in the end, it's the man in the trench that's holding the line. Yes, the artillery does a huge amount of work. Yes, the drones do a lot of work. However, by the time, like he says here, the titanic work of the units stationed there continues. But I am personally proud of these fighters, but numbers are numbers. And even if 20 of the 100 attacking reach the trenches, our soldiers can hardly give them an equal fight because they simply got tired destroying those 80 soldiers. Russians send 2 more new brigades in this direction, and their strategic potential is limitless. Only the professional work of artillery and heavy equipment units helps to effectively reduce it, but it is worth remembering. The infantry always has the last word. And now, before I go into the extras, I would like to show you guys something here, and I hope that the author sees this. I received this just recently. Book by the name of Escaping Ukraine. In fact, let me get switched up here. And gave it a good read. It is an excellent read. It's relatively short, about 80 pages, as I recall. It took me an hour, a couple hours on an afternoon, and that was while being distracted. It's a story of faith and escape. It's not a combat book. It is a story of faith, hope, escape, putting your trust in God, doing what you are told to do, and carrying it out and having the Lord bless you in each step of the way. I found it a very good read, and I do highly recommend it. Mr. Russell here, Robert Russell, who is the author, is a great friend of the channel, and I am delighted to have him as part of as one of the people who shows up so often and says wonderful things about what's going on. So if you see Mr. Russell in the comments, absolutely say hello, and you might look at picking up a copy of Escaping Ukraine. Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Russell. I'm delighted to have it on my bookcase. So that's it. That was not a paid endorsement. Though full disclosure, I did receive my copy from the author, so I do appreciate that. Let's go ahead and move on to the extras. I am, by the way, still watching for comments, although I'm getting towards the end of things here. So if you want to say something, absolutely pop in. I'm watching for it. Well, in fact, let's do this. Aha! I see that I do have a visitor here who said, Lucille says, organized propaganda campaign based on lies, which they created themselves. That's from early in the live stream here. Yes, this is a self-created propaganda situation. So into the extra stuff today. This is a weird one, so I don't want anybody to take it out of the context in which it is. The long run impact of bombing Vietnam compared to the situation with the German bombing of London. And I don't want anybody to take anything away from this other than that there were, in fact, changes to the economic picture for these locations in the long term compared to when they were the situation they were in before. In this case, Mr. Iglesias says here, Vietnamese towns recovered from the economic impact of American bombing surprisingly quickly. And the big brain approach would be historic preservation is so economically harmful that London benefited on net from German bombing. That is not to say I think London should have been bombed at all. It's just interesting how the areas that were destroyed could then be rebuilt new, fresh, and ready for economic development over time. It's not the way to do this. But it is perhaps a bit of a hope for the future for some of these villages and towns that have been fully destroyed by Russian artillery and Russian troops taking out each and every building. Hopefully, some of them will recover and become even greater than before. Some of them will likely have been wiped entirely off the map and will never recover, at least in our lifetimes. But hopefully, my hope is that the opportunity will be taken to improve those places and make them even better for the future. Even as horrible as that sounds, but take that opportunity to do everything you can. Anton Heroshenko shared this little bit of Russian propaganda. As a proper Russian citizen, I believe there is no Ukraine and Warsaw is a Russian city. This just shows, once again, Russia's intentions were not to just deal with Ukraine. They were going to move past Ukraine. They were going to go into Poland. They were going to go into Moldova. They were going to continue to expand intending for it to be an easy fait accompli that the West would be unable to stop. And yet Ukraine fought back. These Russian imperial ambitions are absolutely still on the table for Russia. They have made no secret of their desire to retake Alaska, their desire to go into Moldova, their desire to retake the Baltic states. So overall, that's the situation that Ukraine is fighting against. And we're going to finish off. I think this should show pretty nicely here. We're going to finish off with these pictures right here. So, I can't get them closer than that, so we'll just do that for now. This is a Ukrainian language teacher, Raisa Ivanova, with her cat, Mashka. She was evacuated. Dang it, I keep doing that out of habit. She was evacuated out of Avdiivka successfully, even though she held out for as long as she possibly could. So this is part of the spirit of Ukraine, and her successful evacuation with her cat says a lot about the priorities of Ukrainians. They love their animals, they love their people, they love the places they live, and they try and work it out for as long as possible until finally the circumstances are too much. And even then, they don't leave their pets behind if they can in any way avoid it. And that's everything for today. Thank you for joining me. This is a shorter live than normal, but it's because I've got a whole lot of things going on, and I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit me with that thumbs up. Subscribe if you would like to see more of my Ukraine war updates and the other stuff I do on U.S. politics. Absolutely. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next